Hi, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I've got a very special guest to talk with us today. This is Jason Stokes from Gasalt Media. He is an author, a filmmaker, and he's working on a pretty cool VR camera. So he's multi-talented. And Jason, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and talking to us to have a conversation about trauma and the various populations that are experiencing a significant amount of trauma at this point with this new administration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a large portion of our population, several groups are experiencing quite a few effects from the last week or so. So it seems like a really good time to get together and talk about this.
Yeah, and this is going to be take two um, of our discussion because you know the time before was just a rehearsal. We forgot to push record, so um,
Accidents happen. It's okay.
yeah. It's just, the truth. That's what happens, right? So,
Um,
I
yeah,
wanted to talk to you. Uh, First, I wanted to kind of tie into our topic for this month for immigration, and I really wanted to talk about, what's happening to our immigrant communities with the different laws now and the mass deportation. What exactly are your thoughts on this?
yeah. And as you said, this is our second run through. So I'm going to try to hopefully grab some. We had such a good conversation. I'm sad that everybody's going to have to miss that one. Um, but yeah, what we are looking at now is that we're seeing the first attack and what we can expect to be a series of movements against the vulnerable populations. And so the first movement that we've seen is to villainize immigrants and use them as a scapegoat and to begin a fear campaign, which is exactly what's going on. Um, Using military force and using what most would call excessive force to strike fear into our immigrant population. We know that there's already been deportations, but the one of the facts is that there's actually been um, less immigrants were removed than were under the Biden administration. This whole thing has been much more of a show, right? We can all tell that it's a lot of theater here. We don't usually use military vehicles for deportations. Um, and the point that I believe behind all of this is it's a show of power. We're trying to make marginalized groups feel as though they're outnumbered and to be afraid. And as we're discussing, we've already seen the effects of that. So we know that migrants aren't showing up. Even legal ones are not showing up to work. They're not going out in public. They're not taking the chances. And the effect that that's having from a trauma perspective is it's living with fear. And so now these groups are living with like existential fear daily, and they're forced to worry about what's going to happen to them and what's going to happen to their families, and are they ever going to see each other again, um, and even are they going to be the victims of violence, or what they have to worry about. And on top of that, it's showing all of our other groups as well who are next in line. They're afraid as well. They know that once this particular domino is falling, then it's going to go to the next, and it's going to go to the next. And so that's given us a very tense situation. It's given us all a very fear-based situation, which we know is an unhealthy place to live. Uh, so yeah, that seems to be where it's beginning.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that about the next in line, because I feel like what this is, you know, these are the trouble. This is the problem, and we're going to get rid of this problem. And if it goes okay, then we're going to move to other population. It's kind of like a test run kind of thing, to see how much of that the American population will accept and let happen. And then after the immigrant population, there'll come others.
Oh, absolutely. History has shown us that this is how fascism works, and we all know that we are in a fascist state. That we are there now. So I think it's important that we face that, we understand that, and we put that definition. This is the beginning of a tyrannical leadership. This is how it goes. This is how it's always gone in the past, and it's always been the most vulnerable groups that go first. So in this case we're witnessing what happens when you villainize a small subset of people who have limited rights. We know that immigrants have limited recourse because they don't have full access to the law. They don't have often a full working command of the language. They don't have the built-in social groups that we have. They don't have the resources monetarily that other people will have. So they're a very vulnerable population. They're an easy target. And when there are already laws on the books that deal with deportations and legalize deportation, which there's a difference between legal deportation and what we're seeing occur now. There are laws that prevent people from existing in any country illegally, and those are open to interpretation, and those are open to conversation. But we're not just seeing those people. We're not just seeing criminals being removed. We're seeing Native Americans being threatened and arrested. We're seeing veterans who are verifiably United States citizens, but because they look different, they're being targeted. So this is a whole different kind of situation that we're dealing with. And what you can do is that you can pervert those laws. You can twist those laws. You can see, like you said, how much can we get away with? How much can we do that the public will decide is either not worth their time or that they're not powerful enough to affect. And so they'll let it happen. And that's what we're watching. This is very much, if history is any indicator, a trial run. So this gives them the practice of gathering up any group that's considered undesirable. And we can remember that in Nazi Germany, because that's the easiest one to go to, because most people are familiar there. This happens in Russia. This has happened in Africa. This has happened in China. This is not anything that's limited. This is all authoritarian regimes. The first thing that they're going to do is they're going to find a target population and they're going to attack them. So in Germany, it was the gays, and it was the Jews, and then it was the mentally infirm or incompetent, and then it's basically just anyone that was an enemy of the state. And once you had walked people down that road where were willing to accept that this person next to me it deserves to be treated as less than human. Once they were willing to accept that, it was a short walk to just convince them that anybody else, anybody who was an outsider, even people that they knew, even their own families, that it was right. Or at the very least, there was nothing they could do about it because this is just the way it is. This is how this works.
Right. Yeah, and I like the way you brought up the whole dehumanization thing, because if we do talk about the Holocaust, which is, I feel like, is the the experience, maybe the event that we know most about. We have the most information about that event, the Holocaust. And so if you look at that, they started dehumanizing very quickly. They gave each of the people that went to the concentration camps, they gave them just a number. They no longer, once they were in the concentration camp, they didn't have a name. They were a number. They were treated like animals. You saw all these things, and it's a lot easier to harm somebody that doesn't have a name like your neighbor, like the person that you work with. You know, and it's just fascinating to me because all of our immigrants, all of them have been looped into this word criminal. And so that it is okay with the American people to deport criminals. But these are not criminals that they're deporting. They're deporting various kinds of people that were born here, that are here legally, because there's various ways that an immigrant can come to a country. It's not just one way and one way only. And so these people were either born here or legally here, but they're getting deported too. And so it's making it so that people aren't wanting to go to work. They're not wanting to go to school. And it's interesting because after our conversation about this, I have heard so many different things that are going on. It's like something new every hour. And I heard about teachers in South Carolina that were actually calling ICE on their students. And then I've also heard of things not just being in this country, but when we have like immigrants, they're American citizens, but immigrants over in other countries, there were some that were just detained and arrested in various other countries around. I think they said Switzerland and then Israel. And then I heard something about how our doctors and several US citizens are stuck in Palestine and these doctors have been stuck there since the beginning of January because they were told they could come back to the country. And then the last minute they were told they couldn't. And so it's interesting and heartbreaking to see how even out of this country, how things are happening. And I think they were saying that there were 2 military planes that went to Colombia, the country in South America, and they were told not to land there, that they couldn't land there. And so now they have a 25% tariff on all of their goods. And it's just like you're taking these people, these immigrants, and not returning them to their home country, but just taking them anywhere, and you're dumping them out like they're just an object. And it's just horrible. I mean, how can you do that?
It
I just
is. It is, and I think it's important that we start paying attention to, and I mean, we have, but we need to continue paying attention to the language that was used because it was justified under the umbrella of these are criminals. But if we look in what's going on in Miami, where now people who were pro-Trump, politicians who were pro-Trump, are now worried that their people, the Cubans, who are in process of becoming legal citizens, are going to be deported, and um, and on, and that's going on. And the students, there's international students who are now worried that due to the wording of the executive order, if they speak out about pro-Palestinian or what could be construed even as anti-American sentiment, that they could be sent deported themselves. And we know that this is a pattern. This is a pattern with this administration. They've already talked about clearing Gaza and clearing the West Bank and sending them all to Egypt. This is just the solution that they do with people who are inconvenienced.
yes.
They send them away. They're an easy scapegoat, and then they get rid of them. But, and this is an important revelation of what's going on, is that the intent was never actually to send them to another country. At the same time that this order was signed, there was another request for what they will call prisons, but we're going to call them what they are. They're camps. These are concentration camps, and they requested 100,000 beds for new concentration camp bodies, basically, because that's all they see them as. They're not humans anymore. They're just people. He knew that these countries were not going to just take random loads of immigrants that we were offloading that have not had due process, by the way. The plan is to bring them back, put them in camps, turn them into prisoners, and use them as slave labor. And it is nothing less than that, which is a human rights catastrophe. It is beyond inhumane. It's pure evil when you really get down to it. But this is what we're looking at. And to
Yeah.
think that all of this could be done just by saying some vague comments that there's some criminals out there who have no names, who have no faces, which is the way that fascism works. That face can then get moved to any of us. There's no one that they can't put the criminal label on. And it's a very short walk to all enemies of the state are now in these camps. So it's terrifying. It's something we need to be very, very aware of at this time.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because, yeah, they said that it was even before uh, the presidential election and everything, that Texas had started building these camps or these prisons. And it's just very interesting how it's okay for it with everybody. I remember when I did go down to the Texas border uh, with this group, Practice Mercy, that does wonderful work there. It was so interesting that you could hear. We went on this boat ride down the Rio Grande, and we were able to see the big, beautiful wall, which was really a joke. And then we had people that lived there that were riding on the boat with us. And just to hear them talk, the things they were saying, they said, "Oh well, I hope there's alligators in this water. Then it can just eat them, and you don't have to worry about it." And just such terrible things. And you're thinking that how can people be that way? And it's just getting worse. That was like in 2019, and now it's just so much worse. The language we're using.
I think it's something that we are aware of now, luckily, more than we used to be. We have unfortunately lived in a society, or fortunately, we've lived in a society that was allowed a certain level of ignorance. Um, and it's not because there was a lack of criminality or a lack of oversight things going on in this country that were concerning and terrible on a daily basis. It's just that we had a democracy that was more or less successful, and it allowed us to ignore the inconvenience. If you weren't a member of those groups, if you were, then you have known much longer than I would say the majority of society, that things have never been okay. There's always been great inequality here. And we've made great strides recently in bringing that to attention. But at the same time, when you bring inequality into focus, the people who benefit from it, the people who benefit from uh, being in a better place, privilege, that's what I was looking for. So when you benefit from this privilege, you can see it as an affront that somebody is taking what you viewed as yours. This is a trick that conservatives and media would like to play up, that what you had was rightfully yours, but what we had before was stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And so when somebody hands you something and tells you this is yours, and then somebody comes along and says, "Hey, actually some of that belongs to me. Like I have rights too. I deserve some of this as well." You can see that if you're not broadly focused, you can see that as a threat. You can see that as somebody taking from you. But that is not how equity works. And so what we have are a number of people who felt like they were already being abused, or who already in our capitalist system felt like they were just barely surviving, or they were struggling. And then here comes this other person who says, I'm struggling too. I'm even struggling worse than you, and I need a seat at the table. And they don't want to share what they've been like hoarding of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets really difficult to see that we're all on the same playing field. And then we have these well, now we have these billionaires and these multimillionaires and these, like, you know, oligarchs who are hoarding more than anyone, and the only reason we have scarcity is because of that. But they've got us fighting amongst ourselves over who deserves what, and what rights we have, and all of this is just a smokescreen for what's really going on. This class war that they're trying to distract us from with division and causing us to attack one another. Immigration is just the beginning of that. It's just one section of this divisive narrative that has invaded our culture and is polarized us to a degree that this is where we are.
Yeah, definitely. And so can we talk too about our queer populations, our LGBTQA plus populations, and then how that translates into that? Because, you know, they too are discriminated against drastically, and they too are kind of villainized. That whole population is just villainized and misunderstood, and the trauma that brings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you and I have a similar background. We both grew up in a very conservative area of a very conservative state.
Mhm.
And when you have Strom Thurmond as your representative for like 100 years, things don't progress well. So I am a member of the queer community and have been obviously for my entire life. Um, that kind of oppression that existed then, we thought we were making progress. We've made amazing strides. We have identified a number of groups. We have um, changed the narrative. We've changed the story around from before it was a very shame based and a very um, taboo subject, and now people are proud of who they are. They recognize their uniqueness and their individuality, and how queer lives contribute to society, how they make the world a better place, how we all belong in this tapestry of humanity. And now we're seeing a return to the old days, the old ways. So I think that all of us who are watching what's going on with the immigrants, we're thinking we're next. And that's the stress. You have to relive the traumas of your childhood when you see that all of the progress that we've made and all of the efforts that we've made to create this safe space are being dismantled. And so now all of a sudden you're not safe anymore, and you can't just go back. There's no going back in the closet. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
And especially for like our like the trans community, because we're the easy target. And that seems to be the one, we're the smallest group. And that seems to be the one that he's after the most. Right. So that seems to be the one that's like, the easy target for this administration. There's a small number. It's a very small percentage of the U.S. population, but it speaks to the fears of the conservative community on such a visceral level. They're afraid of blending the masculinity and the femininity, and they're afraid of losing those strict roles. Um,
Yes.
and so it's just been a very easy target. And we look at these immigrants and we say, when he's done with them, he's coming for us. We
Yeah.
know that we're next. And so you've got that stress of where you're trying to fight for people that are vulnerable, but you know that you've got to start protecting yourself as well. And where does it even stop? You know, and how bad will it get? And none of us really know. We know they're confiscating passports. We know that thanks to this new administration's complete ignorance of science, that we've all been declared female legally in the United States now. So that's fun. And but anybody who has a non-binary marker is now that's now illegal. And so while we're looking at, do we need to escape? Do we need to be like our ancestors who came here to escape tyranny? They got on the boat and they came here. Well, where do we go? And some of us can't leave because when you get to the airport, when you get to the boat, they're going to take your passport. And if we're lucky, that's the worst they'll do because it's still just the first week. So I
Okay.
think that's the kind of when we talk about the damage that's being done, the mental damage that's being done, it's that fear. And it always comes back to fear. It's about making people afraid and trying to divide them at the same time. And we have to resist both of those with everything that we have.
Right. Yeah, and you know, it becomes like we said before, like an us and them, and it's really distressing, you know, for you to take for you as a human being to look at another person and say, "You're bad, you're not right," or da 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 da, all these things, and that human being cannot help what is going on with them, and maybe they can, but they don't want to, and that's okay, you know. And everybody's human. That's the bottom line, is everybody's human, and
Yeah.
everybody is slightly different, and the differences are beautiful and can add so much richness. I know I would not want everybody in the world to think just like me. That would be scary. So, you
Agreed.
know, if everybody in the world thought everything like me, no. We all need different ideas, different talents, different beliefs to add to each other and to add to life. And like you say, it's just, well, that's happening over there. I'm next. It's the trauma of the anticipation and what that does to you. And I think we talked earlier about this book that I'm reading that's been very powerful, and I love it. It's called What Happened to You, and it's by Dr. Bruce Perry, and who's a neuroscience researcher and psychologist, and Oprah Winfrey, and they talk about the different things and ways that trauma affects you cellularly down to physical parts of your brain, and to just watch that happen, and you can see it happen on people that are targeted, you know. And I feel
Absolutely.
like, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to forever lament that we didn't record that conversation because I don't know if I could ever be that eloquent as we were earlier, but I'm going to try. And what we were discussing was that the brain reacts, as you said, it reacts physically to stress, to trauma, to prolonged periods of adrenaline and prolonged periods of just stress in general. And it's really fascinating because if you have situations like with brain damage or with injuries, that the brain has to rewire itself. And this is something that it does all the time. If you have a traumatic injury, if you have a trauma-based injury, these are still injuries to the brain, and they change the the function, they change the shape, they change the size of a brain. An unhealthy brain that is dealing with uh, these constant issues will have to deal with inflammation. It will have to deal with actually shrinking. It'll have to do with inefficient um, connections. And all of this has a long-term effect. And these effects are cumulative, much like smoking is what we were saying. Um, these effects accumulate over time and they build on each other. And so a person who has like a relatively minor issue, um, and I say relatively minor, but I mean, we're talking about things like if you have a clinical depression, or if you have issues like even stuff that's ADHD or OCD, which I have both, um, or things that are treatable. When you compound that to the stress of the stigmas that our society enforces on people who are less than, people who are somehow damaged, people who, because they don't contribute monetarily to society, are seen as failures, like because they're seen as a personal failure, and it's not. It's not even close. We are here for more than to create capital for billionaires or even like just regular business owners. What we provide to the economy is not a measure of our self-worth. Our humanity is a measure of our worth. We all have it. We are all equal. We're all on equal grounds there. Um, so yeah, we were discussing how this damage, this living in fear or living in poverty or living outside of social groups that don't give you access to community and love, which are essential, will degrade you physically over time. And then you have bad health. And once you
Mhm.
have bad health, you're seen as a further burden on society. And then it just makes it worse and it compounds. And then you get people who, through no fault of their own, are pariahs and are ostracized from society. And they're seen as inhuman now. And it has nothing to do with that at all. It's just a society that is not set up to properly assist people with things that they need. You wouldn't will see somebody with a broken leg and say, oh, that's because they're a bad person. If they were a good person, they wouldn't have broken their leg. So we're not going to treat them. We're going to leave them on their own. And when they can't show up to work or when they can't function as well, we're going to blame that on them as well. You wouldn't do that. So we shouldn't be doing it in all these other cases as well.
Yes, definitely. And we were talking too about the humanity, and we were talking about how there's there's all these different classes and how this country seems to be thinking that, well, you have to be up here, you have to have money, you have to have success, and we spend a lifetime trying to reach that bar. And then if we most of the time there's like less than 1% of our population of Americans that will not be able to release, I mean, to gain access to those things. We'll never reach that bar, but we're going to kill ourselves trying.
We will kill ourselves and each other, attempting to reach this mythical land where we've achieved everything that we've ever wanted and we have everything that we've ever wanted. And when you look at it, when you really look at it, all it's doing is brainwashing us into thinking that we need to work harder constantly, but also that we need to compete with each other. We have become enemies of each other. And this is at the root of what's happening to us as a society. We have become competitors. We have become isolated. We don't believe in community anymore. We don't believe in helping anymore. We don't believe that the true value comes from quality of life. We're looking for quantifiable economic and monetary status. This is not success. If anything, this is a moral failure. To put yourself above your neighbors and above your family and even above like your own children in some cases, to put you this single concept of a capitalistic success ahead of the relationships, this is a moral failure. That is when you have stopped being a person and you stopped being a member of a community and you started being something else entirely. They've convinced us to buy this, to buy into this, this whole concept. And that is driving us out of our communities. It's seeing each other when you're at work, instead of seeing a coworker, somebody who understands your situation, someone who lives a similar life to you, you see a competitor who might be the one who takes your raise, who might take your promotion. You see somebody who might cause you to struggle to achieve your next goal. This is not a healthy way of thinking. This is a very unnatural way of thinking. Humans are not isolationist. Humans cannot exist alone. Um, and it kind of blends into something else. And I know you were kind of tiptoeing around it. So I will make the most uncomfortable segue possible. But it also blends into the fact that our society is learning to see the world in black and white. We're increasingly trying to see friend or enemy, for or against, us versus them. This is the vision that politicians, especially our current ones, are fostering and using to their advantage. It's the divisiveness. What we're failing to see is our commonality. We're all humans. All human beings are unique in that there is not a single one of us that is an exact replica of another. We exist on this beautiful spectrum of all kinds of we were talking about religious beliefs, like your spiritual beliefs. We were talking about your ethnicity. We're talking about your class. We're talking about all these things that they use to divide us. These are what make us unique and interesting. This is what provides color to the world. This is what, prevents stagnation. Homogeny is never good. That's extinction lies on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So we're all these unique individual people, and we're united by our commonality that we are all human beings. And when we can begin to conceptualize that we can all be these different brands of this single thing, and that it does not have to be a dividing area. Being different is not bad. Being different is good. Being different is the best, the best possible outcome, because that is how a species grows and adapts. Little known fact, I think in today's world, I'm way on a tangent, but I'll make it. I'll bring it together. Um, in today's world, Neanderthals and Denisovians and I pronounced that wrong, and like Homo sapiens would probably separate from each other. Like we would be like, they're not our species, they're not like us, and our politicians would say they're dangerous, and we don't want to mix with them. Um, but science has proven that it is actually our interbreeding of these former hominid species that gave us the immunity that was necessary to survive in countries, subtropical areas like Asia. And that it was the dietary habits of Neanderthals that contributed to the Homo sapien DNA, what ended up becoming modern humans, and gave us the hardiness that we would need to survive in certain temperatures and certain climates. And that these gene mutations that came from mixing is how we survived. And it's very likely the ones that didn't, that are no longer around, they're extinct. I mean, this is a very easy to understand metaphor for how our society needs to work. We need to learn to celebrate our differences as much as we can, and encourage, which is where now I'm trying to recap an hour worth of conversation, and which is how we had gotten to the point where we were talking about a society. A society functions for the betterment of all, the betterment of everybody in it, and the paradox of tolerance is where we were at with that. Um, that you have to become intolerant of intolerance. The more, if two groups are learning to communicate and they're learning to compromise with each other, they can grow together. But as soon as a member puts itself before the group, as soon as somebody stands out and says, I'm going to be a Nazi in this particular case, my group's better than your group, my subgroup is more important than your subgroup, then that is when our tolerance has to end. That is when we have to say, this is not acceptable for a society. A community cannot exist this way. We accept everyone under the basis that we all are seeking the common good, that we're all seeking to lift everybody up. And at a point where you decide that it becomes inwardly focused, well, then you have removed yourself from society. And that is where that's where that friction is going to come from. We cannot allow this to be the direction that we go because we will not survive that way.
That's right. That's right. And if we continue this, then we're going to be a society of deeply traumatized individuals. And
We already are.
it's just going to get worse. And it's like, what can you do? Because here you are, and then you're dealt this hand from somebody, and you're told these specific things about you from someone, and now you're just going to either think that, believing that about yourself and bring yourself down, or you're going to think you can't do things. you know I think a lot about when I was when I had just had my car accident, and um, I wasn't able to walk or to do a lot of different things. I wasn't able to communicate very well. And from that, I got in my mind somehow that I was beneath people, and I had this bar in my mind of a person that I needed to be, but I couldn't physically reach that bar. And I spent way too much of my life trying to do everything I could to be that person, and I think pretty soon we're all going to try, if we keep traumatizing each other, we're going to try to just fit in this box that we don't need to try to fit in. I thought about the analogy, after our conversation. I thought about the analogy of like a gold box. And I even talk about it in my book. I talk about there being this box, and there's a doorway, and I'm cut off various parts of me to try and fit through that doorway. And I think that becomes a struggle for all of us. And instead of, what we need to do is, instead of having that doorway so narrow that nobody can fit in it without taking parts of themselves off and losing such wonderful pieces of themselves, if we instead just widen that doorway and let everybody walk through, it would be nice to do that. And I don't know, that's kind of how we need to do, and how we stop this traumatizing each other and just making it you and us, like them and us kind of idea. And we were even talking about, I was saying that, I don't know if you remember, but I was saying how, I thought it was so sad that as a society we had to give ourselves the LGBTQ plus everything, because we need to be included in something. These people need to be included in something. And why can't you just be, oh, you're just a beautiful human. You are in our group. Why does it have to be specifically different letters?
Right.
But you made a good point
Mhm.
that I had never really even thought about. Do you remember what you said?
I do. Yeah. And it kind of starts, it was a little way back because I know we're talking about how there's so many things in our culture that are not a choice. All right. So where you're born in the world is not a choice. That is a circumstance. What race you are, what gender you are, what sexual orientation you are. These things are not choices. And that we have othered so many people based on circumstances of what kind of person they are, not based on choice. To be hateful is a choice. And so that is something that we need to be more aware of. But speaking of what you were saying about how I'm trying to walk through all of these, um, you were putting yourself in this box and you were removing parts of yourselves. And we were talking about how neurodivergence and how neurodivergents feel this way because we see the world differently. So I have aspects of autism and very strong ADHD. And so when I was growing up, I thought I was broken. I thought that I was bad at life. And the world reinforced this concept over and over again because they said you cannot perform, which is a dead giveaway, in the same way that others can. And because you're not as effective at certain things, then you are somehow less of a human being. You're a flawed human being. And they still refer to these things as disorders, um, which we could go back and forth on all day. Have lots of feelings about that. Um, it wasn't too long ago that being gay was considered a disorder, was considered a mental illness. And then as we began to study, we began to understand, and we became more accepting, then we had more access to case histories and we had more access to funding. We began to understand that it's not an illness, it's not even a disorder, it is just a natural form of humanity. Um, and so that's where that's this continuing pattern, which is the theme of our talk today, is the othering. um these people are different, these people are different, and so they get treated differently. But to bring it all together, we were talking about how specifically in the queer community that we have all these letters, and people tend to get very upset about all the letters. Oh, there's so many letters and there's new ones every day, and that is the point. That is absolutely the point, because we're trying to show that humanity is not black or white, X or Y. It's not one or the other, that it is a spectrum. And each of these letters is a point on that spectrum. In reality, nobody exists purely in one place. We overlap, we intermingle. We're some of this, we're some of that. And that's pretty much to everything that it used to be considered binary. And you recommended a book, and I'm going to recommend a book as well. And that book is called Life Isn't Binary. And it starts out with gender studies, but then it goes into every other element of life that we take as being a black and white scenario. And that is not how the universe works. That's just not how it is. You could really think it's easier to think of it as a spectrum with different points, but in reality, I don't know if you've ever seen a color chart like on a computer or something where you can like pick, and it's purple over here, and it's red, and it's green over here, and it's like this whole beautiful thing. You can be anywhere in there. You can be several different things, and that's what we've been the specifically LGBTQ plus community has embraced this idea. We've embraced this thought that you can be different from me. We're not the same thing. Like a lesbian and gay is not the same. Trans and bisexual is not the same thing. They're not even like loosely. They're very loosely related. But we accept each other, and we accept that we're all humans. And so your fight becomes my fight, because while we're not the same kind of person, that doesn't matter. We're people, and we recognize that we are fighting similar fights, and that we have similar issues, and that we have similar fears. So we support each other. And I think that's what our society needs to learn. And it's something we need to embrace right now, particularly if we're going to help each other. I'm not an immigrant. My parents were born here, but that doesn't mean that I am any different from people who are getting rounded up and sent across the border. We're the same. And so their fight is my fight. And I feel that it is our responsibility as the ones who are currently possessing privilege. So whereas I may be oppressed in the queer community, or I may be oppressed because of not being in a certain monetary class. I also am uh, mostly white. I'm actually part Jewish, but I appear to be just your everyday Caucasian. Um, and I appear male. I live in a cis appearing, heteronormative appearing relationship. So that gives me a certain level of privilege. Um, and that means that I have the ability to go places and to do things that certain other groups cannot do. And I will get treated differently than other groups get treated. And so in this time, it becomes my responsibility to use that as an asset. Um, and other groups can do the same. We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. And so if we support each other, they can't take us all. Like it doesn't have to go the way it has gone in the past. We can prevent this. We have history on our side. We know not only what happens when you don't fight back, but we have case histories of what happens when you do. We remember Birmingham. We remember the nations that gathered to fight Hitler's forces. We've seen to less effect what's happened in Palestine and Israel. We've seen what happened in Taiwan. We have a solid scope of what is effective and what isn't to fight tyranny and oppression. We should use it.
Right, right. And I think I remember we were
We're
discussing,
discussing,
little
little.
little simple things that we can do because, there are millions of us and there's, very few of the people, the oppressors.
There,
And, in comparison, there's just so many of us. And if we just work together, learn from each other, I think that was a big thing that we were talking about. Is one thing we can do is to learn from each other and to understand and to support. Like you say, your fight is my fight, but I need to know what I'm fighting for. So I need to, educate myself, read
mhm.
books,
We
take
need
classes, or just talk to people, just talk. The conversations, and then you can learn so much, right? And so then we can band together and actually do something to make
the
the world
most. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. The most important thing that we can do, it's just what you just said, is we need to talk to each other. We need to learn from each other. We need to open those lines of communication. And when somebody tells you what they need, give it to them. Do that. It's
better.
very easy to feel disheartened right now because we don't know what to do. And it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. But like you said, there is a very small number of actual oppressors and then a very large number of misguided enablers that are
Right.
helping. And there are a percentage, I will not say, like, I do believe that there's good in every human being, but there are a percentage of people out there who just legitimately want to see the worst things possible happen.
Yeah.
We will not reach everyone. Um, but this communication is what allows us to find those commonalities, allows us to find that common ground and see if there is something that we can do to help this group. How can we help that group? How can we strengthen the bonds?
Right.
And just like I said, just
Mhm.
learn what it is that we don't know. If you don't understand, for instance, if you don't understand the struggle of an immigrant, you're like, well, why are they even here? Or what are the different levels of legality? Like, are we deporting criminals or are we deporting citizens? Like, educate yourself on this so that you know, and then you have not only your moral footing to what you are willing and not willing to allow, but you have the background to speak on it. Because if you don't understand what's going on in other people's lives, it's very easy, as we've said over and over, to just see them as faceless masses with the problems that don't pertain to you and don't involve you
Mhm.
and ignore it.
Right.
And that's how it It should never get there, but if you need extra motivation, once it stops being their problem, it will start being your problem. It will come to your doorstep eventually. We've heard the poem. And by then it's too late often. So let's
Yeah.
speak. Let's speak with an and listen with an open mind more than anything.
Yes. Yeah. And I know one quote that I absolutely love is from Elie Wiesel. And he says, he talks about how he was silent. Things were happening. He was silent. And then when things happened to him, no one was there to stand up. That's not the quote. That's just
Right.
me saying, but it's the same gist of it. And I think that's what you were speaking of too, is
Mhm.
that okay, these things are happening. If we don't speak up, then eventually they're going to come after us, and there will be nobody to speak up because everybody will be taken away.
Be going.
You know,
Um,
I feel like silence is just as bad as saying hateful words. It's just not saying anything. I feel like it's just as bad because you're just letting things happen. And instead of saying terrible words, you're letting terrible things happen.
inaction in times of oppression and tyranny is complicit. Um, is a complicit acceptance of what's happening. You become part of the machine because what we do, and like we said, all the groups that we've named, the ones I'm personally a member of, are the only ones I'll speak towards. Neurodivergent see it, queer community sees it, um, all of our marginalized communities see it. When you're silent, it makes us feel as if we have no support. It makes us feel as though when they come, you won't stop them. You won't try to stop them, that we're on our own. And that causes a very fear based um, pattern of behavior, which is dangerous. It's dangerous for everybody. So, speaking up at any infraction that you see, if somebody says something that's ignorant and racist or sexist or homophobic, and you see it in public, you say that is not cool. And you're probably not going to change that person's mind. But what you are going to do is you're going to cause them to think twice about saying it again. But the people around you that are members of communities that you can't see, whether they're disabled or whether they're, LGBT or whatever, uh, they see the support, and that emboldens them to continue fighting, to continue asserting their rights, to continue saying, yes, I belong here. This is my right to be here. So even if all you do is use your voice, it's a powerful tool. Use it, use it often, and use it firmly, that we will not tolerate this. We will not allow this to go unopposed in our society.
Yes, yes. And I think those are big things that we can do, and just the talking to each other. I know I heard I heard on the radio that there were some there were some of our immigrant population that just had not left their house since the new administration took office last week. And there were people in their community that decided to go get groceries for them and go get food for them and go get other things that they needed so they wouldn't have to leave their house, so they wouldn't be more scared, and just doing simple things like that. You know, when you see somebody that may be in a different position than you are, that may need a little extra help, it doesn't hurt anybody to just do that, go that extra mile, go that extra step, you know, and then it'll show support. And I feel like you say, that support means a lot to people. And you know, it can change the way we think, the way we feel, you know, just these simple things, smiling at somebody, acknowledging them. I know I I did a lot of work with our roofless friends back in Charleston, and I would talk time and time again to them, and they would always say, I would love for somebody to just look at me. That's why I love talking to you, because you talk to me. You don't look at me like I'm a problem. You look at me like I'm a human being. And, when he said that, I was like, that's true, because so many people just walk by, you know, our roofless population, and it's terrible. So that's another way of dehumanizing. But when you stop and when you acknowledge people, I mean, it meant the world to him and to
It
others,
does.
you know.
Absolutely. Because we have discussed how trauma and stress and all this damages the body and it damages the brain and it causes us problems. But what we failed to return to earlier was that the therapy and positive interactions and all these things that halt that damage actually repair. And so, whereas like clinical depression will cause, and people say this all the time, causes permanent changes in the brain. We know this to be a fact, but receiving therapy for that, and that can even therapy isn't always in an office. Sometimes it's community. Sometimes that's feeling loved, feeling cared for, reverses those changes. It can help heal. It can help like improve the efficiency of the synapses in the brain. It can balance out chemical imbalances. It can take stress off of you hormonally that allows your body to heal and your inflammation to recede. These acts are not for nothing. We may not see them. We may not see the effects, but I think everybody knows the difference between getting cut off in traffic or having somebody ask how your day was, like a stranger just saying, I like your hat," just something simple. It can change your entire day,
Yeah.
which compounds. So these actions matter. These give people the rejuvenation they need to continue with the stressful situations that we're in. It can't be understated. There's nothing we can do.
Mhm.
That is a lie. That is a lie that oppressive regimes want you to believe.
Mhm.
It is another way of separating us from each other. But we can refuse that. We can see each other as equals, and we can say, I see you, I respect you. And if that is all you do, it still matters.
Yes. Yes. Well, we could talk for hours, like I said, and this is
This is
going
two
into
hours now.
yeah, yeah. But I just want to thank you so much for coming, visiting, talking to me, and kind of sharing opinions and thoughts with our listeners that are so important, and giving us like an insight into things that you have experienced and things that you have noticed. Um, and you are welcome to come back anytime.
Absolutely. Hey, I love these conversations, and I know you mentioned before that you have an email on your website, and I think that's wonderful because I think we have these opinions and we can have these conversations, but as we discussed, we don't know, none of us know everything, and we're all um, growing, changing humans. We're all learning as we go. So I look forward to more conversations and to broaden those horizons and get to know more people.
Oh yeah, definitely. And yeah, my thank you for bringing that up. My website is 8 Months of Hell. That's my original book. It kind of
Good
gets
book.
but that's the website. It has my email on it. And if you want to sign up for my newsletter, it has a little button you can push, and I'll get you on the email list, and you'll get a newsletter monthly just about these different topics. And I would love to hear from you and just have conversations. It's a safe space, there's no judgment. We just want to talk to each other and learn from each other. So, Jason, I thank you so, so much for all that you've done for me, and for stopping by and everything.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
All right. And we'll see you next time on Revive and Rise. Thank you.